Hello, my friend, and welcome to my study. Today I'm going to read you a story that I wrote. It's a true story based on an experience I had at my local rec center in meeting these two elders and sort of what they represent about their culture and their generations and just society and culture in general. I hope you enjoy. So without further ado, I present to you The Two Elders by Dallas Wayne. At the public swimming pool, in two separate trips to the sauna, I met two different elders. I'm just reading from this journal if you see me looking down. My first trip into the sauna, two men were talking, one middle-aged with glasses, the other an older man who was the first elder in this story. They were talking about business and money. The middle-aged man tells the man about his lucrative business. He started his own company and now he's doing quite well for himself. The old man, who was a chubby white bastard, says, "Good for you," and then just begins to brag about how he could be working so hard these days as well, and eventually just turns it into a bash against the younger generations, saying, they don't want to work these days, these young people. You know, they're all lazy and privileged, blah, 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 blah. He could outwork all these young guys, is what he thought, and so on. You know, at this point, I began to ignore him, as he just spat out typical, unintelligent, regurgitated bullshit that's possible to hear at every A&W in the country at breakfast hours. Then further to prove his dim-wittedness and hypocrisy, out of a lack of self-awareness, he goes on to talk about how his main motivation for finding jobs in his life was significant time off. He says he mostly only worked 3 days a week his whole career. The middle-aged man tells him if he's interested and he feels like doing some work now, there's lots of opportunity in his field. The old man replies by saying, he's been retired for years and there's no way he could think of working again. So, after criticizing the youth for not wanting to work, he talks about how he doesn't want to work and how even in his young days, during his prime, he never even worked more than 3 days in a week. The middle-aged man says, well, anyways, ending the conversation, I'm done. He was heated up in the sauna, so he got up to leave. And as he did, he asked the old man, what was your name again? Richard, the old man says. And I say, Dick, under my breath. Figures. So that's the story of the first elder in the sauna. Now, normally, I don't actually do the sauna, like 2 cycles, not if I stay in for a long amount of time, but I actually prefer to go into the steam room. The hot tub is kind of unsanitary. You generally don't really feel like going into a chlorine bath. And the steam room in this situation was broken down, okay? So I just went and took a cold shower, I cooled off, and then I went back into the sauna. And it was as if there was a reason for me to be there. Now this is the story of the second elder. This time in the sauna, there were 2 elderly ladies, a Chinese man, he came in right behind me, and on the top bench sitting, there was a native man, an elder. And he was sitting there, he was singing in his native tongue. So I went and sat beside him. Obviously, I couldn't understand the meaning of his words that he was singing, but they felt important, so I closed my eyes and I listened. His voice was oddly soothing. I sat there in a near meditative state as the native man sang on for several minutes. I began to wonder if he was going to stop. It went on for quite a while. When finally he did, the woman nearest to him asked, "What was that song about?" I can only paraphrase this explanation. because it went on for as long as the song did. And it may have been a translation of the words. It may have been just an interpretation of what he was getting from everybody in the room. Like the energy of everybody in the room was giving him something meaningful to say to them. That was what my feeling was. But all I know is that it went something like this. That song, he said, is for the white buffalo. It's about being grateful for these sacred moments and understanding our experience here in this lifetime. It's about accepting ourselves. We choose to experience this. It's about letting go of blame. He reminds not to blame others for the way things are. We have been beaten and broken, but the strength is inside all of us to go on. And he continued on like that for several minutes, covering all the spiritual bases in a fluid stream of consciousness, as if addressing all the spiritual needs of each person in the sauna. Near the end, he said, "The song is about what the listener thinks it's about. We all have our own interpretation, and that is sacred to us. That is what makes us all perfect in our own way. We hear the things we need to help us on our own journey. That is why I sing these songs. I sang this song and said this prayer, so now anyone who comes into the sauna, it doesn't have to even be for long. Their life will change." Now, clearly the old woman sitting next to him was as touched by his speech as I was, for she reached out and grabbed his hand and gave it an affectionate squeeze. Pure emotion was in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. The elder casually got up and left after a moment. He reminded me of an Indian elder that I occasionally would meet in my dreams. The elder in my dreams always offering judgment-free advice by the fireside in his teepee. "That was nice," the other older lady, who had been quiet the whole time, said. It was nice. And everyone in the sauna was touched by this elder's actions. And perhaps the people that entered the sauna that day, their lives were changed. You see, anyone can cut down and criticize others in a pathetic attempt to build themselves up. But who is willing to give understanding and encouragement and healing? What is this interaction that I had with these two elders? What does it say about our culture? What does it mean that so many youth are demoralized? Remember that it was the modern man who demoralized the native culture, and they made every attempt to destroy it. The modern man's culture is one against life. Our world is dead and soulless. The world of the ancient ones, the natives, our ancestors, all of our ancestors, was a world full of spirits and meaning and magic. It was a world with tradition that connects everyone to nature and to oneself, rather than to machines and suffering. So, that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope it makes you think about why are things the way they are? Why did those two men have such completely different attitudes, And why did the first old man think that his attitude was justified? And you know what's quite sad? Just to give some further context to this story. Not long after that experience, Some people complained about the native man singing in the sauna, because I guess it wasn't the only time that he had been doing it. You know, I can understand maybe you didn't go to the sauna to listen to someone sing. That's not the point here. The point here is he was trying to do the right thing, and he's the one who gets in trouble. And what does that say about our society? Thanks for watching.